Have you ever wondered what truly draws a woman's attention toward a man, beyond just the usual clichés about looks or charm? It's one of those questions that seems simple on the surface. Like, why does she like him? But underneath, it's tangled in layers of psychology, biology, and something almost mysterious. What if I told you that there are subtle actions men do, often without even realizing, which activate deep parts of a woman's unconscious mind? And no, it's not about flashy moves or rehearsed lines. It's about something far more elemental and surprisingly tender. I remember a moment from a few years back in downtown Chicago. There was this guy named Mark, a graphic designer in his early 30s. Nothing spectacular about his looks, pretty average, but every time he entered a room at that small creative agency where I used to work, several women seemed to gravitate toward him. Not because he was loud or trying to impress anyone, but simply because of how he carried himself in everyday moments. Once, during a lunch break outside the office cafe, I noticed Mark carefully helping an elderly woman who had dropped her shopping bags. No grand gesture, no audience, just genuine care. The way he did it wasn't showy, it was as if kindness came naturally. And somehow, that small act made him stand out more than any polished pickup line. That kind of magnetic pull connects deeply with what Carl Jung explored when discussing the intricate dance between conscious behavior and the unconscious forces shaping our relationships. Jung believed that attraction isn't merely about surface preferences, it taps into archetypes and symbols embedded within us all, formed over centuries of human experience. When a man exhibits certain behaviors aligned with these primal patterns, they resonate with something fundamental inside women's psyches. But let's pause here for a second, because this isn't about turning yourself into someone you're not or following some rigid checklist. It's more like discovering hidden parts of your natural self that genuinely connect with others on an emotional level, and sometimes even surprise you with their power. One of the first actions men can take, and this is often overlooked, is cultivating authentic presence through active listening. Now, before your mind jumps to cliché advice about, just listen, hear me out. Active listening isn't just nodding politely or waiting for your turn to speak. It means fully tuning in to what the other person is expressing, not only through their words but their tone, pauses, and body language. It's allowing yourself to be truly present without planning your response ahead or getting distracted by your phone. Yes, even when notifications buzz. I recall Anna, a marketing consultant from Portland, once sharing how she felt instantly connected with her colleague Jake after a long meeting where he didn't interrupt once despite her nervous rambling about project deadlines. She said she sensed he genuinely cared about her stress and wasn't just pretending to be polite. That feeling triggered trust and attraction that grew naturally over weeks. From Jung's perspective, active listening taps into the archetype of the nurturer, or the caregiver, which many women unconsciously seek as part of their relational needs. Someone who creates emotional safety by validating their experience. It contrasts sharply with behaviors dominated by self-focus or impatience that can push people away quickly. Here's a little exercise you can try right now, even if it feels awkward at first. Next time you engage in conversation, whether with friends or strangers, consciously slow down your thoughts and focus entirely on the other person's voice and expressions without preparing what to say next. Try reflecting silently on what they might be feeling beneath their words instead of jumping straight into problem-solving mode. You might be surprised how different conversations feel, and how people respond positively when they realize they're genuinely heard rather than just listened to superficially. Sometimes we underestimate how rare true presence is in today's fast-paced world packed with distractions and half-hearted attention spans. Don't get me started on social media scrolling during meetups. But tapping into this ability activates unconscious signals that say, "This man values me enough to give me his whole attention." And that message carries weight far beyond superficial charm. Interestingly enough, active listening also requires humility. The willingness to set aside ego temporarily and embrace vulnerability by admitting you don't have all the answers or control over the conversation flow. That aligns with Jung's notion that authentic relationships flourish when both individuals reveal parts of themselves honestly rather than hiding behind masks crafted for social acceptance. Humility paired with presence becomes magnetic because it invites women, and people generally, into shared humanity rather than competition or performance. Just imagine for a moment how encounters would shift if more men practiced this simple action daily, not as strategy but as genuine openness. Of course, None of this means ignoring boundaries or personal needs. Healthy relationships balance caring with self-respect, but starting from authentic listening lays down groundwork for deeper connection rarely achieved otherwise. And if this resonates with you so far, if you find yourself curious about these subtle dynamics shaping attraction, I'd encourage you to subscribe to the channel because we're going deeper into these patterns through lived examples and practical steps grounded in psychological insights, plus some honest reflections on our human quirks. So here's a recap before moving forward. Genuine presence through active listening sends powerful signals rooted in ancient psychological patterns recognized by Jungian thought. A blend of care, humility, and attentiveness that fosters trust and emotional safety in women's unconscious minds. Now let me share another instance illustrating this idea beyond typical social settings. A friend named Lucas once recounted an unexpected moment while waiting at an airport gate for hours due to flight delays last year. He started chatting casually with a woman sitting nearby who looked exhausted from travel stress. Instead of jumping into small talk cliches like, "Where are you headed?" Lucas asked quietly how she was feeling emotionally amid the chaos, which caught her off guard pleasantly because most people don't usually ask such things directly anymore. She opened up about missing her family after months abroad working remotely during pandemic restrictions. A vulnerability Lucas met without judgment but simply held space for her feelings until she felt heard completely. That short interaction didn't magically create romance overnight but left her feeling valued momentarily. And according to Lucas, it shifted the energy between them noticeably compared to other casual airport chats where everyone keeps conversations surface level out of habit or fear. The takeaway? When men slow down enough to listen actively, even briefly, it sparks connections beyond words alone because emotions are acknowledged honestly rather than glossed over quickly as inconvenient distractions. It might sound deceptively simple, but practicing this takes patience and awareness since modern culture often rewards fast talking or dominating conversations. Raise your hand if you've caught yourself doing this unintentionally. Yet learning this skill invites richer exchanges aligned with profound human needs Jung identified beneath everyday interactions. Before we dive deeper into other actions shaping attraction dynamics based on these psychological undercurrents, think back. How often do you find yourself fully present when someone shares something meaningful? Not just physically there but mentally uncluttered? Try jotting down moments this week when you manage genuine listening successfully, and notice any shifts in others' responses toward openness or warmth too. This small yet transformative habit plants seeds for trust building foundationally important for any relationship, not just romantic ones, and unlocks access to archetypal energies resonant across cultures described subtly in Jungian ideas about shared human symbols lurking beneath conscious awareness. And speaking candidly here, I'm still working on this myself sometimes. It requires effort, not perfection, which makes these discoveries relatable rather than intimidating mandates from some unreachable ideal version of masculinity crafted by society expectations. You know, the one promising effortless attraction while wearing designer cologne. At its core though, choosing presence over distraction means stepping closer toward embodying traits women often sense intuitively as safe and appealing without needing analysis. A truth echoing through time though rarely discussed outright until now. So maybe start small today? Tune deeply next conversation, whether at home chatting with siblings after work or grabbing coffee downtown during busy afternoons. The reward lies less in immediate results but long-term shifts toward meaningful connection fueled by sincere attention given freely. And yeah, there will be moments where your mind wanders despite best intentions. Mine still does. But recognizing those slips is part of growing too. Anyway, if you feel ready for practical tools helping cultivate active listening further, or curious how other actions align similarly, I'm excited we'll explore those soon here together because real change happens gradually through consistent little steps informed by understanding ourselves better inside out as humans navigating relationships constantly shifting like weather patterns, unpredictable yet fascinating all the same. So tell me below, have you experienced times when someone truly listened to you? And how did that impact your feeling toward them afterward? Sharing stories helps us learn collectively beyond abstract theories, which is why I cherish hearing from viewers like you along this journey too. And if it helps keep curiosity alive while adding new insights based on solid psychological foundations inspired by thinkers like Jung, that's my goal perfectly hit today without sounding preachy or distant hopefully. Alright then. Let's keep unfolding these layers next time around because there are 8 more actions revealing surprising ways men naturally attract women when approached authentically rather than mechanically. Spoiler alert. They're often simpler than expected. Until then, remember. Sometimes attraction grows quietly, not from grand gestures but honest moments where presence meets vulnerability halfway, and that subtle exchange can make all difference between fleeting interest versus something lasting worth cherishing deeply over years ahead. Enough said, for now. There's something quietly powerful about vulnerability, though, paradoxically, it often feels like the very thing we're taught to avoid, especially when it comes to attraction. But what if I told you that showing vulnerability, not as a calculated move but as an honest expression, can create magnetic pull? It sounds counterintuitive. After all, many men grow up with the idea that they must be stoic, unshakable, or even a bit mysterious to be attractive. Yet, when you look through the lens of deep psychological patterns inspired by Jungian insights, vulnerability aligns with a profound archetype: the wounded healer, someone who doesn't pretend to be perfect but embraces their imperfections openly. I once met David at a casual meetup in Austin last spring. He was an architect known for his meticulous designs and calm demeanor. But what struck me wasn't just his professional skill. It was a moment during a group conversation when he shared his struggle with anxiety, a topic rarely touched on openly among men in those circles. He didn't frame it as a complaint or seek pity. Instead, he spoke with simple honesty about how challenging it had been to manage stress while still pursuing his dreams. The way he spoke invited empathy rather than judgment. What was fascinating is how this shifted the energy of the room immediately. People leaned in, not out of curiosity or gossip, but because vulnerability sparked connection. Women at the table responded with warmth and respect rather than distancing themselves. It was as if David's willingness to show his unfinished self activated something deeply human in others. This aligns with Jung's observation that embracing our shadow, the parts we hide or reject, opens doors to authenticity and wholeness in relationships. When a man acknowledges his vulnerabilities without shame or defensiveness, he transcends superficial facades and invites genuine closeness. Now, don't get me wrong. Vulnerability isn't about oversharing personal traumas indiscriminately or using emotional disclosure manipulatively. It's about calibrated openness aligned with context and trust building rather than overshooting boundaries too early. So here's an exercise you can try. Next time you find yourself in conversation where trust feels safe, maybe with close friends or people you're comfortable around, practice sharing one small challenge or insecurity honestly, but without dramatizing it. For example, I've been feeling a bit overwhelmed with work lately. Notice how people respond when this admission comes from a place of calm acceptance rather than seeking reassurance desperately. You might discover that this kind of honest openness encourages others, even women, to lower their defenses and engage more deeply because it signals emotional availability, the kind that fosters real connection beyond surface-level interactions. Interestingly, this doesn't mean vulnerability is weakness. Quite the opposite. It takes courage to drop masks society often pressures us to wear constantly, the strong man stereotype. And this courage taps into archetypal energies women sense intuitively as trustworthy and appealing without needing explicit explanation. In fact, I've seen this play out subtly but clearly during recent social gatherings amid the ongoing cultural shifts emphasizing mental health awareness worldwide since 2022. Men willing to talk candidly about feelings found themselves surprisingly well received compared to old norms demanding silent resilience. But remember, it's not about rushing into intense disclosures immediately but experimenting gently with small steps toward authentic sharing adapted naturally to each unique relationship dynamic. Moving forward from vulnerability, have you noticed how sometimes confidence is misunderstood? Not the loud kind that dominates conversations or flaunts achievements aggressively, but a quiet kind of confidence that simply trusts itself without needing constant validation? This brings me to another crucial point. Consistency in one's actions over time builds credibility and magnetic presence far better than momentary grand gestures or surface charm does. Let me illustrate this with Jenna and Marcus's story from Seattle last summer. Marcus was starting his own tech startup while juggling part-time teaching gigs. On the surface, Marcus wasn't flashy or boastful. He showed up every day punctually for meetings, returned emails promptly even under pressure, and followed through on promises no matter how small. Jenna noticed this pattern not because Marcus announced it loudly but because reliability created subtle trust increments each time they interacted, like bricks quietly stacking up into a sturdy foundation she could lean on emotionally. This steady consistency resonated deeply within her unconscious mind. As Jung would suggest, that archetypes linked with dependability and stability activate feelings of safety critical for attraction beyond initial sparks alone. Here's where many stumble. Excitement fades quickly if reliability is absent afterward. Charisma can't replace follow-through indefinitely. Try applying this yourself by picking one area in daily life. Could be work deadlines, returning calls, being on time, and consciously committing to doing exactly what you say consistently for at least 1 week without excuses. You'll likely notice how your sense of self-worth shifts alongside others' perception of you becoming more grounded. And yes, women tend to pick up on such subtle but potent energy patterns naturally even if unspoken explicitly. There's also something paradoxical here worth pondering. Consistency doesn't mean rigidity or losing spontaneity. It means aligning your actions authentically so what you project matches who you genuinely are beneath social masks often worn habitually. On occasion Marcus admitted feeling overwhelmed juggling responsibilities. See? Vulnerability again. Yet he never let those moments derail commitments entirely because he valued integrity internally more than external applause. Now I realize many might feel conflicted balancing showing vulnerability while remaining consistent. Sounds tricky? It is. But these qualities aren't mutually exclusive. They complement each other when integrated thoughtfully rather than compartmentalized superficially. To recap loosely before moving ahead. No pressure. Being consistently reliable nurtures subconscious signals akin to ancestral human needs for dependable allies in uncertain times. A pattern Jung identified repeatedly across cultures expressed symbolically through myths involving steadfast guardianship roles men embody unconsciously attracting potential partners seeking stability mixed with kindness embedded earlier through vulnerability exposure we discussed already. And speaking plainly here, practicing both requires patience because modern life bombards us constantly tempting shortcuts like ghosting texts or flaking plans casually, guilty as charged sometimes myself. So maybe start small by setting realistic promises honestly reflecting current energy levels instead of overcommitting impulsively just for appearance sake. Which ironically might harm attraction chances long-term despite short-term wins perceived socially sometimes. In closing this chunk, for now, I want to share a quick practical tip based on these ideas combined. Keep a simple journal noting moments when you feel authentic connection sparked either by expressing vulnerability modestly or honoring commitments reliably. Reflect briefly on what internal shifts occurred within yourself during those experiences. Were there subtle changes in mood? Confidence? How people responded? This reflective habit nurtures awareness essential for deepening these traits organically inside daily routines rather than forcing them artificially, which aligns perfectly with Jungian emphasis on natural unfolding integration over mechanical transformation imposed externally. And since we're exploring these nuanced dynamics in real-life settings, I'd love if you share below some stories from your own experiences trying either opening up vulnerably or following through consistently despite challenges encountered along the way. It helps us all learn beyond theory because lived moments carry richer insights far beyond any book passage alone. Alright then. We have two powerful actions now uncovered contributing uniquely yet complementarily toward attracting women authentically rooted not just in superficial tricks but meaningful psychological resonance beneath conscious awareness layers shaping relational chemistry fundamentally. Next time we'll explore further surprising behaviors forming part of this intricate puzzle expanding our understanding beyond common dating advice cliches while keeping things practical enough anyone can test comfortably step by step. Until then remember. Real attraction isn't magic performed on stage but subtle energies cultivated daily when honesty meets dependability, two forces weaving together silently binding hearts closer quietly over time making bonds worth holding onto longer than fleeting glances ever will. Well, what do you think so far? Has any story here reminded you of moments where someone caught your attention differently because they seemed genuinely real, rather than playing roles expected by social scripts? Drop your thoughts below. It always amazes me how personal reflections deepen collective understanding way beyond isolated lectures. And yes, I'm still figuring out my own balance between being open enough yet consistent enough too. So let's learn together, gradually embracing complexities of human connections, stepwise evolving toward richer relational experiences, embracing imperfections happily along journey. Alright. See you next time for more honest unpacking, revealing surprisingly simple yet profound actions men can take, echoing timeless psychological truths, informing how relationships grow authentically alive today amidst all life's chaos swirling non-stop around us. Till then, keep listening carefully, to yourself first, and watch how magnetic connections start appearing unexpectedly where least anticipated. There's a subtle yet profound action that often flies under the radar when discussing attraction, but it carries an almost magnetic pull. A man's ability to embrace and express his own sense of purpose with quiet conviction. Not the boastful kind of purpose tied to external achievements or loud declarations, but an inner clarity about what matters deeply, values, passions, or a meaningful direction guiding daily choices. It's something that speaks directly to unconscious patterns in women's psyches connected to enduring commitment and emotional reliability. I was reminded of this recently during a conversation with Lena, a yoga instructor from Brooklyn, who mentioned how she felt drawn to her partner, Sam, not because he had impressive social status but because of the way he lived intentionally. Sam wasn't perfect or always sure about everything, but he carried himself with a steady sense of knowing where he's headed, even through doubts and detours life threw at him. This wasn't about grand plans tattooed on his chest. It was more like a quiet compass inside that shaped his actions authentically day after day. This quality resonates deeply with Jungian concepts regarding the self archetype, the integration point of one's identity where authenticity, meaning, and direction converge. When a man lives aligned with this internal compass rather than external pressures or fleeting desires, it triggers trust and respect on levels often unconscious yet undeniable. It reminds me how many times I've seen couples where one partner's calm dedication to what truly matters inspires admiration quietly but persistently over time, creating bonds resistant to superficial distractions so common nowadays. To put this into practice, spend some time reflecting on what genuinely lights you up or feels essential in your life beyond societal expectations. Write down 3 areas, could be relationships, creativity, personal growth, that you feel compelled toward regardless of external validation. Then choose one small action aligned with those values to pursue consistently over the next week. For example, if creativity calls you strongly but often gets pushed aside by daily chaos, dedicate 15 minutes each day simply sketching or journaling without judgment. Notice how nurturing your inner purpose, even modestly, shifts your energy and invites others, including potential partners, to connect with you more deeply because you're showing up as someone rooted rather than drifting aimlessly. If you think about it carefully, when we meet people who seem lost or reactive rather than intentional about their lives, it creates subtle discomfort rather than attraction. That lack of groundedness triggers ancient survival instincts signaling unpredictability or unreliability, hardly fertile ground for emotional investment. Of course, living purposefully doesn't mean rigidly following plans, ignoring life's unpredictability. It means holding onto core values while adapting flexibly without losing sight of what truly matters internally. A balance requiring ongoing self-awareness and courage, reminiscent of Jung's emphasis on conscious self-realization rather than unconscious drift. Now, shifting gears a bit here, because sometimes diving into these deep psychological waters feels like swimming against strong currents. I want to invite you toward reflection that might feel unexpectedly liberating. Imagine that attraction isn't a game you play but more an unfolding process where being real wins quietly over performing roles scripted by social norms or dating advice manuals. Think about the stories shared earlier: presence through active listening inviting trust, vulnerability as strength fostering intimacy, consistency building steady foundations, and living aligned with inner purpose radiating authenticity. What if these aren't just isolated tips but interconnected strands weaving together an invisible web beneath conscious awareness shaping how humans gravitate toward each other? It almost seems like tapping into these natural human patterns allows attraction to arise organically, not as forced magic tricks, but as genuine expressions of self meeting other selves willing to engage similarly. I don't mean this sounds easy all the time, heck no. Modern life bombards us with distractions fragmenting attention, Societal pressures confusing identity roles, especially around masculinity notions shifting rapidly now in 2024 culture. And our own fears about rejection or failure lurking silently in backgrounds like old ghosts reminding us not to try too hard or show weakness. But here lies the paradox. Striving less for control yet engaging more earnestly with authentic traits paradoxically increases magnetic pull because people sense energy coherence beneath surface appearances. A kind of resonance difficult to fake indefinitely before cracks appear. And yes, I'm aware that embracing these qualities involves grappling with parts of ourselves we sometimes avoid acknowledging consciously. Doubts hidden behind confidence masks. Moments of loneliness masked by social bravado. Dreams shelved by practical fears. Jung would say these tensions between persona, the mask, and self, our true core, lie at heart of human relational struggles everywhere. So taking steps toward embodying presence, vulnerability, consistency, and purposeful living represents courageously integrating fragmented pieces within rather than escaping into rehearsed roles posed outwardly. A slow transformation requiring patience mixed with honest self-observation along unpredictable paths, sometimes messy but richly rewarding ultimately. If this reflection resonates even faintly, consider this moment as an invitation rather than prescription. An open door beckoning inward exploration coupled with outward practice cultivating relationships built on depth not superficial allure alone. Before wrapping up completely though, I want to pause here briefly, and yes maybe ramble slightly, because these ideas remind me how much relational dynamics today intertwine subtly yet profoundly with broader cultural shifts emphasizing mental health awareness, emotional intelligence growth especially among men wrestling against outdated stereotypes demanding stoicism above all else. We're witnessing small revolutions quietly reshaping how attraction unfolds socially beyond glossy Instagram images into spaces allowing authentic sharing without shame. Which is hopeful and challenging simultaneously since old habits die hard everywhere including within ourselves. Anyway, back on track. If you've stayed till here, thanks for bearing my musings blending psychology with lived encounters. It means you're curious enough, maybe ready for deeper connection experiences yourself beyond quick fixes popularized endlessly online promising instant results rarely delivered sincerely. And since we've explored 9 distinct actions men can embody naturally attracting women grounded not in superficial tricks but foundational human needs echoing archetypal patterns described indirectly through psychological understanding. You might feel encouraged knowing these qualities are accessible progressively rather than overnight transformations expected mistakenly by cultural hype sometimes. So here's my invitation moving forward. Begin integrating one action at a time gently into your daily interactions while maintaining compassionate curiosity for yourself. When slip-ups occur, they will. Observe which resonate most authentically rather than chasing illusions crafted externally promising perfection impossible anyway. This journey aligns closely with Jung's fundamental belief that authentic individuation, the process of becoming fully oneself, is less linear path than cyclical spiral involving setbacks alongside breakthroughs continuously unfolding over lifetime shaping richer relational landscapes dynamically changing as we grow internally. And maybe most importantly, remember attraction ultimately thrives when relationship participants meet vulnerably balanced by consistent care expressing genuine values anchored internally beyond superficial appearances alone. Which is both humbling and empowering realization transcending typical dating advice cliches endlessly recycled without soul. To close out now, imagine for just a moment what it would mean if every man embraced presence fully listening without distraction. Showed vulnerability honestly without fear, acted consistently honoring promises small and large, and lived aligned unwaveringly with inner purpose? Wouldn't that shift not only individual connections profoundly but ripple outward influencing communities encouraging healthier emotional exchanges broadly? I don't claim answers are simple nor solutions universal. But opening space for such reflections matters deeply amid fast-paced world craving meaningful attachments rarely nurtured adequately nowadays. So I leave you with this final thought, not as conclusion ending discussion, but seed planted hopefully growing slowly inside encouraging courageous authentic living attracting others naturally when we least expect. Because real magnetism isn't crafted artificially. It emerges quietly from depths where truth meets courage meeting compassion inviting us all closer together despite imperfections happily embraced along way. Thanks for staying present throughout this exploration. I'd love hearing your insights below if any story sparked new understanding or questions emerged stirring curiosity. That continuous dialogue enriches collective growth far better than solitary reflection alone does. Until next time, keep tuning inward, gently listening, carefully noticing subtle energies flowing through everyday encounters, suddenly glowing brighter, reflecting your evolving, authentic self, steadily unfolding, beautifully alive here now.